مجنونه الله 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 في الأيتام الله الله
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل، نعم المولى ونعم النصير. ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين، لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين، روحي وأرواح العالمين لتراب مقدمه الفداء، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين، آمين يا رب العالمين. Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First of all, I actually want to apologize because we had to rush everything through, so there was a lot of the content for Mukhtar that I had actually put together ended up just staying as, well, text in a document that I'm working on. So that's something maybe we can pick up at a future stage, and I would recommend everyone who can find it watch Mukhtar. It's a very important series. And like I was telling one of the brothers late last night, the way to watch Mukhtar is first you watch the Imam Ali series, then you watch the Imam al-Hassan series, then watch Mukhtar, then watch Imam al-Rida. And that will give you a very, very clean, solid grounding and understanding into what happened. And in terms of the authenticity of these series, you'll find that all of the content has been verified by real senior ulama in the Hawza. And of course, it's all produced by Islamic Republic of Iran. So it's something that can be relied on. Right, so today's session is an extra one that I think we decided to put together just to cover questions, because initially I wanted to cover questions within the actual sessions, but we very quickly realized that that's really not going to be practical. It's just not going to work. So we thought we'll take today's session, because of course we started one day ahead of everyone else, which is why we're finishing one day ahead of everyone else. Having said that, tomorrow is still Ashura, today is Tasu'ah. Nothing has changed in terms of the dates. So I've got a list of questions over here right now. Some of them I think we've resolved, some of them need to be discussed. So if anyone does have any questions, be it about the sessions that we've had, if you need clarity on anything, about any of the subjects, any of the ideas that we've spoken about over the last 9 or 10 days, and finally about perhaps anything, but remember, I'm just a small student, so there will be times where I'll just put my hand up and say, yeah, I can give you an idea, but actually, because you're looking for something which is a Shari'i ruling, it's better for you to speak to your maraja. So I'll start with the questions over here, which will hopefully give some of the brothers and sisters a chance to ask any other questions. So the first question we've got, I don't know who these questions are from, it's just a list that the brothers have compiled. So the first question is, do you recommend any book to read about Karbala? In English, like I said, it's difficult because there's a very, very good book called Nafs al-Mahmum. The problem with the English translation is that it's worse than garbage. It's something that maybe Google Translate would maybe be okay with. It's not a very good translation. I believe in recent times there has been an attempt to retranslate the Maqtal of Abu Mikhnaf. And back maybe nearly 20 years ago, um, someone in my family did a translation of Abu Mikhnaf, but that translation was okay. It was a good effort, but it was very difficult to read. It was accurate, but the English was extremely difficult for anyone to read. And so it became something that's just an academic thing. It's good for people who are studying, maybe, but it wasn't good for people like me whose English is okay, possible. It wasn't that great. So there's a new version that's been retranslated, and my understanding is that it's better, but because I haven't actually read it, I can't really recommend it, simply because I don't know. Uh, it's very, very difficult to find good books in English. I mean, there are other books which are like there's something called Tears for Karbala and Tears for Sham and all of this that have been written by some Hoja Zakirin. But the issue with those books, is that they have some accounts in them which are problematic, I think is the politest term. There are situations described in these books where right at the end on the day of Ashura, when Imam Hussein is fighting, he hears a cry from the sky and he puts his sword away and allows everyone to kill him. This is khilaf sha'na Imam. This is something the Imam would never do. It's not something that's real. There's also the whole story of the marriage of Qasim ibn al-Hassan, which, no, this didn't happen. This is all these tahrif and exaggerations and things that people have added to, for whatever reason, increase the emotional significance of the event. And such an event like Ashura doesn't really need that. So I really wish I could answer that question, but whoever asked this question, please join the group, the WhatsApp group the brothers have created, and I will look around. And if you give me till around Arba'in, I will try and find something. And I will also be reading this new Abu Mikhnaf. If it's good, I will recommend that as well. I hope that answers the question of the brother or the sister. I don't know who asked the question. Okay, question number 2 is, how can we enjoin the good and forbid the evil wherever we are, especially in the West? Well, I think we discussed this in some detail throughout the sessions, but for the sake of clarity, enjoining the good and forbidding the evil doesn't mean you look down on someone or you insult someone or you abuse someone. You can do it in the kindest, and you should do it in the kindest possible way. And in the West, one of the ways you can do it, even to non-Muslims, is to encourage them not to do something bad and encourage them to do something good. That's all it is. It's not, it's really not rocket science. I think sometimes we as Muslims, especially Shia, we maybe overcomplicate Islam for us. Islam is very, very easy. Islam is really, really easy. Islam, only becomes complicated when we complicate it ourselves. Otherwise, it's actually very easy. So in the West, in the East, in the North, in the South, the way you would do Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahi anil Munkar is the same. You speak the truth. You, of course, analyze the situation. If there is a situation where your life is in danger from doing this, then you need to think a little bit more as to whether you actually doing an activity which is going to put you at risk, does that have a greater benefit for Islam than if you don't do that particular Amr bil Ma'ruf or Nahi anil Munkar activity and you're able to proceed? Where is the greater benefit to Islam? And at the same time, you also have to look at it in a way that if you do something like Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahi anil Munkar in a particular subject, you have to make sure that you doing this activity doesn't cast negative light upon Islam. It doesn't. Now, negative light, when looked at in the West, doesn't mean that, oh, the West is going to dislike Islam. Habibi, they already dislike Islam. And more importantly, they don't know Islam. So, they will just, if they're not going to like it, and if you're just going to reinforce a stereotype, don't do this. Don't just reinforce stereotypes. Try and make it so that people respect Islam because they see that you're an honest person. The same way Rasulullah, before Ba'that, before he formally announced that he was the messenger of God, he had many positive titles. One of them was Al-Amin, the trustworthy. One of them was As-Sadiq, the most truthful. And people knew if they gave him something in trust, someone's going away and they want to leave £1,000 with him, they know that he's not going to touch a halfpenny of that £1,000. And when they come back, that money will be intact. Or that house. So if someone says, please look after my family or my shop while I'm away, he will be the most trustworthy person. He would never lie. He would never actively deceive someone, cause problems for someone. He wouldn't oppress. So if we work in this way, where we try and portray the best image of the true Islam, that doesn't mean we compromise Islam. Please don't misunderstand me. We make sure we show the best impression, the best image, the truth really about Islam. Then this is something that will help us, inshallah. And maybe this is how we can try and do Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahi anil Munkar. Okay, so someone has asked a question just now, and so I'm going to look at this. The question is, how can people in the West participate in avenging the martyrdom of the two modern-day companions of Imam Hussein, Hajj Qasim and Hajj Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis? By speaking the truth to the ones who killed them, and by exposing the reality of what they are. The most powerful thing that anyone can do in front of a zalim was what Sayyid Zainab did in front of Yazid, that we commemorate during Arba'een. And that was, Sayyid Zainab, she didn't have a machine gun or a sword or anything. She was a lady in her hijab. But she spoke truth to this zalim. And this zalim crumbled. He literally withered away into nothingness. And today, the name Sayyid Zainab is something which every believer, every truthful person, every honest person, including from our brothers of Christianity, including from the Sunnah, they love Sayyid Zainab. And so maybe one of the ways that we in the West can work towards avenging the illegal assassination of Hajj Qasim Soleimani and Hajj Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis is to speak the truth about those people who did it, why they did it, what was the motivation. And also at the same time, we should be telling people who was Hajj Qasim Soleimani, who was Hajj Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis. Many people, even sadly our Shia, they don't realize that the very fact that they can go to ziyarah to Sham, to Iraq, and hatta to Iran, is because of the sacrifices given by Hajj Qasim Soleimani and Hajj Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis. So, we should let people know and educate them. And before, of course, educating anyone else, we should first learn ourselves who these people were. So maybe that helps. Give me a salawat, please. I hope that answered your question. So, moving on to the next question that we have over here. And this is one I remember seeing. The person is asking, what did you mean when you mentioned that people have been deceived regarding China? I know that the US is simply using the plight of the Uyghurs for its own gain, but the government of China is as illegitimate as that of America, is it not? Regardless of how much China is oppressing or not oppressing Muslims, no government but the Islamic Republic is endorsed by Allah. Sure, China is not at war with Muslim countries like America is, and thus making an alliance with them in accordance with the rules of jihad makes sense. However, they too are an enemy in the long run. No? And just to clarify, I meant that only Iran attempts to rule by the law of God, while China and America both rule by the law of man and are illegitimate from that perspective. There's a lot of questions in this. This is not one question. First of all, the brother or sister did clarify that we need to understand one thing about the Islamic Republic of Iran. We all love, we all care about, and we all support, inshallah, Islamic Republic of Iran. But we must be under no illusion. Iran is not a utopia. Iran is not perfect, far from it. It's the best we've got, yes. But it's not something that we can say, Allah is definitely endorsing this, or no. It is attempting to do the best that it can. But there are many, many mistakes that have been made. One mistake I will give you an example of. When the Islamic Revolution was initially victorious back in 1979, Ayatollah Shahid Beheshti and a few others were responsible, including Ja'far Sobhani and others. They were tasked with building the constitution of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And they built this. Following on from that, there was a need to reform the banking and economic system of Iran so that it didn't rely on the interest-laden petrodollar system that is prevalent in the West, and that nearly every country has to work with it. Imam Khomeini Quddus Sirruhu Sharif explicitly gave an instruction that we have to develop an Islamic banking system, not like this Islamic Bank of England or HSBC, Takaful or anything like this. No, not this rubbish. Real Islamic banking system. And we have to use that. Unfortunately, for many reasons, including the fact that the war in Iran, the war by Iraq, started, this particular pathway was not realized. And as a result, Iran is still part of this, or was part of this Western system. Thankfully, the sanctions came along and they forced Iran out of this system. So now Iran has to work to build its own system. So Iran is by no means infallible. Iran has made mistakes, and it will still make mistakes. Within the government of Imam Ali, within the government of Rasulullah, the very fact that you have laws demands that it's not a utopia, that people will commit crimes, people will do negative things. So we need to understand this. Now onto the subject of the Uyghurs. This is a little bit complicated, and it might take a few minutes for me to cover. But I invite everyone to go and read about the Uyghurs. No, read from Human Rights Watch and Amnesty and all of these jokers. Read from the Chinese people and read from really independent avenues. Because in order to understand how the game is being played with the Uyghurs, you have to understand the background. So in terms of the Uyghurs, what happened is the Uyghurs have been living in China since right at the beginning. And they have been, right at the beginning of Islam, they have been a part of Chinese society from the beginning. Their number is in the tens of millions. They are not, a tiny, tiny portion of China. They are significant. And one of the things many people don't know is China, during its initial communist stage, when initially the communist revolution happened, there was a rule which only allowed people, families, to have one child, and that's it. Did you know that China exempted the Uyghur Muslims from this rule? So Uyghurs could have more than one child, no issue, no question, no problem. Secondly, there are masajids across the various provinces, and the masajids are many. Now, let's come to what the propaganda stems from. When there was the conspiracy and to ignite this problem in Syria, of course, we know Saudi was instrumental explicitly in this, along with Israel, along with America. But Saudi was the one who was the one waving the flag, shall we say? Now, they knew that Syria is an ally of Iran and it's an ally of Lebanon, and they knew that Russia and China are both allies of Iran. They also knew that if Syria is harmed, Iran is not going to walk away. Iran is going to step in and help. Same with Iraq. The Saudis are not, well, they might look a little bit dim, but they're not. They are actually very smart. They have some very, very smart strategists. I just wish that they had some honor. So, at the beginning of this civil war, so called, and it wasn't a civil war, it was an externally imposed war on Syria, you had someone by the name of Saud al Faisal and Bandar Bush. We call him Bandar Bush. He's Bandar Prince Bandar of Bandar Bush fame. They had meetings. They went to visit China, and they went to visit Moscow, Russia. And they told both of these people, and this is a quote I have read specifically, and the authenticity of what I'm telling you is verifiable. I know it from people who were there, who know about this firsthand, but the information is not exactly secret, it's well known. They said to Mr. Putin that if you go in and help Syria, we will ignite a fire inside Chechnya. Chechnya is the majority Muslim province of Russia. It's one of the Soviet republics, and it's had problems with the Wahhabi Takfiri influence. Moscow ignored them. And the leader of Chechnya is actually a very good man, a very sensible man. And he made sure that there was no issue. The same discussion was had with China. They went to China and they said that, look, if you come in and help Syria, or even if you work within the diplomatic channels to prevent us getting our way in Syria, then we will unleash the Uyghur Muslims upon you. China again ignored, but China started looking at what's going on, as did Russia. And they saw among the people that were going into Syria, the foreign so-called jihadists, but I call them terrorists, there was a large number of them from Chechnya, but there was an even larger number of them from the Uyghur population in China. Now, when Iran stepped in, Russia stepped in, Hezbollah stepped in, and they began to defeat Daesh. Of course, these terrorists who are completely owned and inspired by America, by Israel, by Saudi, they need to go back somewhere. America is not going to say, come, we will welcome you. No, they're going to say, look, go back to your country and, create problems. And because many of the Chechen ones decided they didn't want to go back over there, and they started to make refugee trains and join refugee camps and move into Syria, many of them are still sitting in Idlib. And this is not just in Syria, this also cascades into Iraq. In the massive onslaught in Iraq, where Mosul was taken, a large number of the battalions of Daesh were from the Uyghurs and from the Chechens. So this is stuff we have to remember. America is not going to sacrifice its own people. It's going to sacrifice only externals, people it doesn't really care about, people who are stupid enough to think America will support them. So when China saw that there is an influx of these people back, it has to protect its own sovereignty, it has to protect its own stability. Anyone who studies a little bit of history regarding China will know that the worst possible thing that you can do to a Chinese government is to incite any sort of chaos. They have lost millions through chaotic scenarios, instigations from the outside, one tribe against another tribe, against the third tribe, and you end up with all three tribes being wiped out. It's a lot more detailed than that. I'm having to rush through it because I don't want to start doing a huge lecture on Chinese history. Suffice it to say, at that point, when China started seeing that there were a lot of these people coming back, it began to arrest them, rightly so. And were some innocents caught in the crossfire? It's entirely possible. But there has been a lot of Saudi influence among the Uyghurs. And unfortunately, this has created a lot of uncertainty. However, the myth, and I use the word in full caps in bold, the myth of concentration camps and re-education camps and all of this, regardless of how much footage Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch and the BBC and the Pentagon and all of these people come out with, is rubbish. Absolute rubbish. I have spoken to people within the provinces where the Uyghurs are and other provinces outside of, I can't pronounce the name, which is why I'm not saying it, in other parts of China. And the intention that America had with regard to the Uyghurs is to create a similar sort of chaotic scenario that they were trying to create in Hong Kong. So that then this entire province, Xinjiang, I think it's called, something like this, this entire province starts to revolt, which does a cascade. They get Xinjiang, the province of the Uyghurs, revolting, they get Taiwan revolting, they get Hong Kong revolting, and before you know it, China is in a situation where it's fighting on too many fronts internally against its own people, something they really don't want to do. Now, as for whether China is a oppressing or an illegitimate government, Habibi, look, yes, it's not an Islamic government, but is it a government that is actually doing something good for its people? Yes, it does look out for its people. This is one of the key components of the Chinese government. One of the things the West doesn't like is that China doesn't operate in the way of the West, where it actually does work for the people. If you look at China's handling of this entire COVID crisis, as soon as they realized what's going on, again, regardless of the lies that you hear on the Western media outlets, regardless of the lies, China has handled this admirably. And it has also gone out of its way to help others. You know, Iran has been helped by China. European countries have been helped by China. What has America done? America hijacked a shipment of N95 masks from Beijing that were destined to go to France. This is America. It's a hijacker. It's a bandit. It's a highway robber. Whereas China came along and said, look, we'll help you. You know, yes, we understand this is a problem that will affect all of us, so we'll help you. You know, you're a poorer country, you can't pay, it's fine. Don't worry. You know, we can work out an agreement later on. You can pay us in, for example, you can buy products from us, or you can, you know, pay us in installments or whatever. So, you know, we shouldn't look at things in such a binary point of perspective. Because even in time of Rasulullah, there were good governments that were not Muslim. For example, you have the government that was there in Abyssinia at the time, run by the Christians. And there was the first minor hijrah where the Muslims were sent over there because they knew, Rasulullah knew that this person, he's honorable and he's just. And he won't listen to the lies of the Meccan pagans when they go, even if it affects his trade, because he is someone governed by justice and by honor. So, we have to be very careful when we, suddenly look at things in a very binary fashion. Look, where the country does not have a majority Muslim population, you cannot impose an Islamic government. An Islamic government is not imposed, it's something which happens organically. In Iran, when the revolution was successful, it was only successful because the people wanted it. In the time of Rasulullah, the victory, they call it the conquest, the Fath of Mecca, happened because the people in Mecca, the majority of the people in Mecca, irrespective of some of the elites, but the majority of the population realized that this idea of Islam is compelling, it's true, and we need to move away from this idea of worshipping bricks and stone. So, we have to look at things from a very slightly calmer perspective and not just be, oh, they're Muslims, so they're going to hell. No, it's not quite as black and white as that. Sometimes it's not feasible to do things in, to hack the notion of turning around and saying China becomes a Muslim country. It will happen when there are enough Muslims or when Imam al-Hujjah Jalla Ta'ala Faraj Sharif comes. But now the idea is laughable. It's not going to happen. And if we just determine that China or some other country is illegitimate because it's not running Islam, then what about Saudi? Saudi professes to be running Islam. Does it have even the smallest modicum of legitimacy? No. It's a corrupt state, it's the Arab Zionists, and it's no different to so-called Israel. So we need to be a little bit more intelligent on that. The next question is, when will you speak about istikhara? Not today. Istikhara is a very long subject. It's very, very abusable. And so I'm going to avoid talking about it in a short period of time. I'm very sorry to the person. If you're on the WhatsApp group, then feel free to message me privately. We can have a phone call and discuss it, but be prepared, have a cup of coffee or tea, and be ready for a good 1-2 hour conversation, because istikhara is not something trivial. And it is abused a lot, unfortunately. Number 5, and istikhara, just for those of you who don't know, is asking Allah about a specific matter. But there are lots of conditions surrounding it, but I'm not going to go into that right now. So the next question is, there's been a lot of debate about voting in the West, particularly America. Just wanted to get your opinion if that's okay. Sure, it's okay. You see, the problem with voting in and of itself, there's no problem with this. I don't believe. And Islamically, I can't see any problem with voting per se. However, the situation in America, voting is acceptable when you have a genuine democracy, when you have a genuine government that is brought into power by the fair and legitimate vote of the people. What you have in the UK and America is nothing like that. It's a farcical system. In America, you have this thing called the Electoral College. In the UK, you have these constituencies and all of this gibberish. And a little bit of maneuvering can turn around and make one party get more power and, all of this. But that's one side of the problem. The other side of the problem is the way the elections are conducted. The way the governments or the parties concerned, the way they promote their ideas, this is a very big problem, because they turn around and essentially, for want of a better word, they lie blatantly. They will tell you, we will do this for you, and we will do this for you, and we will do this for you. And they rally up the support, but when they get their kursi, they don't do any of it, and they do normally the opposite. Now, someone listening might be thinking, well, Donald Trump, he did say he's going to build his wall, and he did say he was going to do a Muslim ban, and he did say he's going to come out of JCPOA. Yes, This is true. He did say all of this, and he did it. Good for him. Does that make him a good person? How's he doing when it comes to, the killing, the wanton killing of people of color, the wanton arrest of people who are not white, and the letting of people who are white with armed assault rifles go from this side to this side, even after they've killed two or three people? And even when arresting them, the police turn around and are, literally wearing kiddie gloves and being kind to them. Whereas a poor man, an African man, like, for example, George Floyd or this other person, Jacob, uh, he's just going into his car. He gets shot 7 times. He's paralyzed. He's paralyzed, but they still handcuff him to the hospital bed. Habibi, this is a paralyzed man. He's not going anywhere. What stupidity is this? You need to handcuff him. So the thing is, when it's a corrupt system, there's an argument to say your vote really doesn't mean anything. And all it is the enemy, the powers that be want you to think that you voting is a panacea, a cure, a universal cure. That today, if you vote for Mr. Biden, then all of the problems of Trump and all of the problems that America has got, all of the inequality, all of the corruption, all of the racism, all of the fascism is going to go away overnight. Habibi, this is not going to happen. I can write it down for you. And also, when it came to Trump and Clinton, I remember when they were, doing all of this presidential debates and all of this stuff. And Trump was turning around and saying, crooked Hillary, he's going to put her in jail and all of this rubbish. I mean, do you know that these people sit down and have meals together? These people, the Trumps and the Clintons and the Bidens, these people are all in bed with each other. They love each other. They are close friends. They just lie in the public eye to fool you. As long as that's happening, I would argue that it's pointless because the system is broken. But of course, I'm not qualified to give you a fatwa on this. I would like to think common sense would prevail and that people will actually understand. But if you need a ruling on it, then I will say the classic and standard line, please refer to your marja. Give me a salawat and we try and continue. So I'm going to skim through a few questions because some of the questions are very long and I don't really want to do long answers. I'm going to ignore this next question. How living in the West is challenging, especially. Okay. So number 7 is an important question. You know how living in the West is challenging, especially when there is haram everywhere. What are some tips to prevent yourself from staying away from haram? Well, this refers back to one of the themes within the entire series of sessions. Make Allah your friend. Befriend Allah. And He will take you away from haram yourself. That haram will become not only haram, but extremely ugly to you. And you will just want to just be away from it. So build up your relationship with Allah, build up your relationship with Quran. And when you know something is haram, let's say you're walking down the street and you see a billboard and that billboard is showing something haram. Or you're watching TV and the TV decides to show something problematic. And these are very trivial examples, I know. Then just look away. In terms of haram, there are many layers of haram as well. You've got the whole idea of, one might argue that some people who work in specific industries, so for example, let's say you have a friend, and this friend works in the gambling industry, which is a haram industry. And he's just an IT person, for example. He's doing his job. He's not a gambler himself. He's just doing his job. Ya Allah, come on, it's a job. No. The money that person earns is problematic because the money is generated entirely from haram activity. And not just haram on a private level, but haram on a social level, which destroys societies. Why do you think the West promotes gambling and all of these bet 123 and bet 456 every 10 seconds you see on YouTube? Adverts within your videos, you see all of these adverts for gambling associations. You see gambling about, I don't know, what the royal family is going to wear next, or what football game is going to do this, and what. Habibi, this is gambling's haram. Finished. There's no, there's no ifs and buts. No, it's haram. Khalas. So stay away from these type of things. Avoid haram. Avoid eating haram. And eating haram also means the type of haram I said. So if you're going to a friend's house, if this friend's work is something like this, then maybe you decide that you go to a good Muslim restaurant and you pay. At least that way you'll be having a halal meal and your friend will be having a halal meal. Of course, this is assuming you have a halal job, yeah? If you are also working in that type of industry that is haram, then I would recommend you very, very strongly to find a job. My own example, I'm an IT person. I don't know how many of you know that. I'm a software engineer. I'm not a full-time talaba, house a student. I follow the pathway that Imam Ali taught us, which is that you have your regular job. Imam Ali used to be a farmer, and you do your Islamic work for the sake of Allah. This is an approach I've always adopted. Alhamdulillah, I'm qualified. I have the ability to, program computers and things, have a profession. And I sometimes have had job offers, very lucrative job offers, from gambling companies. Very lucrative, to the point where if I work for them for a couple of years, maybe I can retire. But I would rather take a lower paid job that is halal than take a high paid job where I'm selling my soul. There is also the issue of, just be sensible. Everything that is haram has an effect on you in multiple ways. So be careful of this. This is maybe one way that can help you. So the next question is about Lebanon, which I'm actually going to ignore right now because, again, that's going to get very lengthy. And then this person is asking, and also being a scholar from the UK, what is your take on British Shiism, which Imam Khamenei has talked about? Look, British Shiism and American Sunniism, as Imam Khamenei has spoken about, are real, are things. I have experienced them and what they are and what they stand for firsthand. There is no Islam within these ideologies. There is only the ideology of hate. There is only the remnant, the sort of veneer of Islam. One might even argue that this British Shiism is a style of Zionism that has infected the Shia. All it does is preach hatred. All it does is preach hatred for historical characters and for our brothers of the Sunnah. It actively, and I spoke about this briefly yesterday, it actively tells you to not help the Palestinians because they are Nawasib. They are enemies of Ahlul Bayt, which is a lie. And even if they were enemies of Ahlul Bayt, if they are oppressed, we have to help them. They are not enemies of Ahlul Bayt, I hasten to correct. But we have to help them, whether they're Muslim, whether they're not Muslim. If someone is genuinely oppressed, then we have a duty as people who actually follow Islam to help them. British Shiism is what Imam Khomeini used to call Islam Amriki. It's the American Islam. It's Islam which has had its soul ripped out of it. And yes, there are people who profess to be so-called maraja and so-called ulama. Many people wearing these clothes will jump up and down like monkeys on the minbar, and they will preach you what is British Shiism. But British Shiism is not just one faction. British Shiism and American Sunniism is anyone who is preaching you an Islam that is not the pure Muhammadan Islam, the pure Islam of Muhammad. If someone is giving you an Islam which is secular, if someone is giving you an Islam which is extreme, then even if they don't fall into the traditional understanding of British Shiism, they are part of it. British Shiism is not just one group and not just some little cult. run by some foreigner who's run away over here. No, it's far more serious than that. It's an ideology that is corrupt and broken, but it's an ideology shared by many, many people, sadly. So my take on it is that it is a problem. It is a cancer. It is something manufactured. Consider it like, to understand it in more simple terms, consider it like the latter-day Khawarij. Except these Khawarij, they also pretend to be Shi'i as well as pretending to be on the Sunnah side. They are dangerous. They have harmed people's belief. I know people who have left Islam after coming to contact with them. These people have no love for Islam. They have no love for Allah. These are the same people that were promoting and supporting the invasion of Iraq in 2003, which led to the carnage that we see today. These are the same people that said that they will go and fight Daesh, and they made big pictures with, military uniform, but how many of them went to the battlefield? Not even one. Not one. But they made a big song and dance about it on social media. They're the same people that will turn around, and any person who comes in from the UK to Karbala, to one of these houses that they have, they'll come along and they'll say, "Oh, mashallah, you're a lecturer in England, mashallah, you have a turban." And they'll throw a turban on this guy's head. Even if the person has no comprehension of basic Islamic studies, of Arabic grammar, of Farsi, of anything. So British Shiism is dangerous, and we should be aware of it. Moving on, I'm going to take one more question and then we can, inshallah, do a very, very short musibah, because I think we're really rapidly running out of time, as seems to be the theme over here. I'll let Brother Ahfaz pick the last question, so choose whichever the last question you want.
There was a question in the chat asked by Brother Ali Reza. Do you want to answer that question, as he asked it live in the session?
Another one, okay. What is the justification for depoliticizing Muharram when even a simple analysis of the events from Imam al-Hassan's signing of the peace treaty with Muawiyah, which set the ground... Okay, this is actually a very good question. Thank you. The reason is to remove the spirit of Ashura and to remove the potency of this movement. Because remember, the enemy understands that when Imam Khomeini says about the Islamic Revolution, when he was asked, he says, Ashura darim. Everything that we have is from Ashura. Everything we have is from the lessons we learned from Ashura and events leading up to it and leading after it. And this connects to the previous question. Many of the people who are depoliticizing, when you see many of the sessions that are happening, you will see many sessions, unfortunately, where really it's benign. What's being said might be very sweet and everything, but it's completely useless. You will either have people sitting down and speaking at such a super esoteric, metaphysical, I don't know, pseudo-spiritual level that you think, subhanAllah, I'm talking to Ibn Arabi or Mullah Sadra over here. Or you have people who will simplify and dumb the whole thing down to just like, oh, Imam Hussein, he died, it was very tragic. Habibi, yes, we know it was tragic. But Imam Hussein didn't die, so we just sit down and cry. Like I said yesterday, there are people who believe that if I cry for Imam Hussein, Fatima al-Zahra salamullahi alayha will come, she will gather my tears, and they will turn into diamonds, which I will be able to use as currency to buy a house in heaven. Habibi, this is not going to happen. This is a bedtime story maybe people tell their children, but this is no basis in truth. We have nothing like this in the authentic hadith. That's not to say there isn't blessings and benefit in crying for Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. Please don't misunderstand me. There is huge, uncountable benefits. And the benefits are not just within the ma'nawi, the spiritual side, but there are benefits within you, yourself. It cleanses your soul. It brings you closer to Allah. It brings you closer to Abu Abdullah. It makes you understand the events of Ashura more better. So when people depoliticize it, when they remove the political nature, as the questioner, Brother Ali Reza, is asking, it's because these people are the enemy. These people are the ones who are working for the Yazids and the Muawiyahs of this day. They say they love Imam al-Hussein, but they don't understand. Maybe they do understand, but they choose to be like those people who couldn't turn around and help Muslim bin Aqil. And yet these are the same people that will say and write the letters to the Imam and say, yeah, Imam, please come, we want you to lead us. The Imam comes along and says, okay, Habibi, now you need to do this. Imam comes and Imam says, okay, now you need to, for example, stop charging for majalis. Majalis needs to be salawati. Habibi, some of these people will have heart failures. Imam comes along and says, Habibi, you need to stop buying products from oppressive regimes. Habibi, some of these centers will close down. They won't know how to operate because their entire existence, their entire system is based on this. And this also leads into the previous question we covered about the British Shiism and American Sunniism. The only people working to depoliticize Muharram and to turn it into just mindless dogma and stuff which is harmful to Islam and which really makes no sense. And it turns it into something which is more like the way that some of the extreme Christian sects would punish themselves with this blood and all of this crazy stuff, which is haram, completely haram. There is no question about it. And there are large emotions at play over here. When I said that this act of tatbir is haram back in, I think, 2012, I was actively attacked physically by people who wanted to do it. And they said, oh no, it's haram, it's wajib, it's mustahab. Habibi, you're not praying. You're not praying. Imam Hussein on the day of Ashura, they did that namaz, that prayer of fear. And yet you want to cut yourself open, bleed, and then miss dhuhr. And khali fajr. Fajr you've forgotten a long time ago. No, this is British Shiism, and these are the people that were doing it. There is no justification for depoliticizing Muharram, because you're right, even the most rudimentary analysis, the most basic, someone even reads the Wikipedia articles, which have a lot to be, left said, you can see this was extremely political. It was spiritual, political, religious, social. It's got elements in every scenario. So on that note, first of all, I would like to thank Allah for giving this small student the tawfiq and the ability to serve all of these believers. And may Allah accept from myself and from all of you. And inshallah, these sessions are beneficial and something which helps Imam al-Hujjah and acts maybe like some sort of slight balm on the heart of Fatima al-Zahra and Rasulullah as a condolence for the events of Ashura. And inshallah, they go towards maybe helping and educating and guiding people, myself first and foremost. So Ya Allah, we'd like to ask you to accept our small ibadat. And with that, what I would like to do, with permission from the organizers, just do a very, very short musibah, because tomorrow we don't have a session. Normally tonight, night of Tasu'ah, is the night we remember Ali al-Asghar, and tomorrow, of course, is Abu Abdullah Hussein. So I just want to do maybe 5 minutes of musibah, where we just remember the valiant, real valiant warrior, Ali al-Asghar, the 6-month-old warrior within the camp of Imam al-Hussein, and also the master of all of the shuhada, Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. And then we, inshallah, finish. So give me a loud salawat and we move to musibah. صلى الله عليك يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم منا جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعل الله آخر الأهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. My dear brothers and sisters, I want you to take yourself in your mind's eye as a bird. Fly to Karbala. It's the day of Ashura. It's the day of Ashura, and all of the martyrs have gone. All of the ashab of Abu Abdullah have gone. All of the family members have gone. Abul Fadl al-Abbas lies near the banks of Al-Qamah. Qasim ibn al-Hassan has been shred to pieces. Ali al-Akbar is sitting in the battlefield. And our Imam is alone. Our Imam makes a speech. He tells all of the people across all of the world. He says, is there anyone who is left to help me? Is there anyone who is left to defend the honor of the family of Rasulullah? Inside the tent of Rabab, the little baby Ali al-Asghar, who is 6 months old, he hears this call, and this is a baby, a 6-month-old infant. This baby starts to jiggle inside the cot. It starts moving the cot from left to right, agitated, like it wants to do something, like it wants to come and help its master, Imam Hussein. The mother begins to worry and say, what's going on? Before she knows, the baby has come out of the cot and is on the ground. She calls out to Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. Imam Hussein comes into the tent. Imam Hussein sees the baby and he says, maybe if these people have a problem with me, if they have a problem with Hussein, maybe at least they will give at least a glass of water, a cup of water to this infant child. Everyone is concerned. Sayyid Zainab is concerned. Everyone is concerned, but the Imam has spoken and the Imam knows better. And this is part of the maslahah of Ashura. This is part of the way that Ashura needed to happen. Imam takes Ali al-Asghar in his hand. This is a tiny infant. He takes him and he gets on his horse and he goes towards the battlefield. He says to the people that this is a 6-month-old child. The child hasn't had water for 3 days. The mother's milk has dried up and the child is dying of thirst. Can you at least, if you don't want to give Hussein water, that's fine. I will leave the baby on the ground. At least you give the baby some water. At this point, the narrators say that there began to get crying inside. You started to hear crying within the camp of Yazid, within the camp of Umar ibn Sa'ad. Because many of these people had children. They had left their children behind in Kufa. And when they saw this poor child, they began to remember their own children and they could empathize. Shimr looks around and he sees this. He looks at Umar ibn Sa'ad and he says, look, if this continues, this is over. Umar ibn Sa'ad wonders what to do and he looks towards this evil entity known as Harmala. Harmala is said to be a hunter. He's someone who hunts elephants and wild game. And he's also a very callous person. Umar ibn Sa'ad looks at Harmala while Imam is speaking and he says to Harmala, "Iqta' kalam al-Husayn." Cut Hussein's words, break his words off, basically silence him. Because they had realized that Ali al-Asghar's jihad is more powerful than the jihad of Al-Abbas. It's more powerful than the jihad of Zuhair ibn Qayn. It's more powerful than all of these. Because this infant can bring the entire army to its knees, because they will understand how much dhulm, how much oppression is being done. Ajrakum ala Allah. Qarmala looks at the baby. He looks at the baby. He takes a 3-pointed arrow, not a normal arrow, an arrow they use to kill large wild game. He takes this arrow and he begins to aim. 3 times he tries to aim. The first time he looked away, he couldn't. The second time he looked the other way, he couldn't. The third time he closed his eyes and fired. The arrow pierced the tiny parched neck of Ali al-Asghar, and it fused the neck to the hand of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. Imam Hussein looked at the baby, and he looked at Allah, he looked at the sky, and he rubbed the blood onto his beard. And he said, Ya Allah, this is what has become of the Muslim community. This is where they have reached. And I will come to you on Yawm al-Qiyamah with this beard drenched in the blood of Ali al-Asghar. Ajrukum ala Allah. Very quickly we will finish, inshallah. It is said that when Mukhtar was questioning and arresting Harmala, he asked, why did you stop 2 times? Why did you close your eyes for the third one? He said, the first time I looked, I saw the baby's mother coming out of the tent, and my heart wouldn't let me fire the arrow while the mother is looking. The second time I saw another lady, and I didn't know who this lady was. Of course, now we know it said Zainab. And he said, I couldn't bear to see her face, see what I was going to do. And that is why the last time when I fired the arrow, I closed my eyes and I just fired. Ajrukum ala Allah. Now take yourselves forward. Take yourselves forward, if you can bear it, to the day of Ashura to Dhahar. Imam Hussein is alone now. There is no help that has come. Ali al-Asghar has become shaheed, and Imam has buried him in a small grave. Imam Hussein then goes and he fights valiantly. But the enemy were filled with cowards, much like the enemy throughout history and today. And this enemy decided that they cannot fight Imam al-Hussein with swords. So they fired barrage upon barrage upon barrage of arrows on Imam al-Hussein. And according to some of the very authentic riwayat, they say that when Imam Hussein fell off the horse because of all of the wounds, he was suspended neither on the ground and not on the horse, because he was on the actual arrows. Ajrukum ala Allah. Imam Hussein was on the ground now. The arrows have pierced him everywhere. And we hear this in Ziyarat Nahiya, which is a ziyarah for Imam al-Hujjah. I would recommend everyone to read it. And it's Imam al-Hujjah's account of Karbala. So Ziyarat Nahiya, find it, read it, understand it. Shimar comes along and he strides upon the chest of Imam al-Hussein. And he looks at the chest of Imam al-Hussein and he lifts his beard like this, takes his knife, and he severs the head. At that point, according to many of the riwayat, it says that there was a clap of thunder and the sky turned red. And that there was a cry from the sky which says, قَدْ قُتِلَ الْحُسَيْنُ بِكَرْبَلَا قَدْ زُبِحَ الْحُسَيْنُ بِكَرْبَلَا وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ رِضًا بِقَضَائِهِ وَتَسْلِيمًا لِأَمْرِهِ. Ya Allah, we ask you to accept our small ibadat. Ya Allah, we ask you to protect Islam and Muslimin. Ya Allah, we ask you to accept our small azah. Ya Allah, we ask you to make it a source of comfort for Fatima al-Zahra, for Imam al-Hussein, for Rasulullah, and for Hazrat Baqiyatullah. Ya Allah, we ask you to protect Islam and Muslimin. Ya Allah, we ask you to destroy kuffar and munafiqeen. Ya Allah, we ask you to protect all of the Muslims going through hardship, be they in Palestine, be they in Yemen, in Syria, in Iraq, and anywhere in the world. And Ya Allah, we ask you to liberate all of the righteous ulama who are illegally incarcerated, be it Shaykh Ibrahim Zakzaki, or Shaykh Ali Salman, or others. Ya Allah, we ask you to have them freed so that they can continue their activities and their good work in your way. Ya Allah, protect them while they're inside the dungeons of the enemy, and give them solace and give them calm. The same way you gave calm and solace to all of the awliya and all of the anbiya, especially the way you gave solace and comfort to Nabi Yusuf, who was inside the well. Ya Allah, we ask you to protect all of the believers, all of the righteous believers, all of the righteous ulama, all of the righteous maraja, and especially the leader, Imam Khamenei. Ya Allah, we ask you to hasten the return of Imam al-Hujjaj, Allah Ta'ala, Farajahu Sharif, and to count us among those people who are with him and are a source of comfort and joy for him, and not from those who cause him even the tiniest bit of sadness or harm. وآخر الدعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.